being raised down. There are regulations in place, but have they been implemented, and how can this be averted down the line? We've seen this recurring theme almost every year. Unfortunately, we have lost bright and young souls at our various institutions. Now, given the recent tragedy that we witnessed at the Hillside Endarasha Academy, that will be our main focus. Even our reporter, that is John Jacob Kiri, is still at the scene and will be informing us on the update in terms of what truly transpired that faithful day at the Hillside Endarasha Academy that led to the loss of over 20 young souls. And of course, this is a recurring history, as I told you. That's why even we had prepared a story for you that we'll share with you in just a moment. But some of the school safety regulations that have been put in place to ensure that those incidents are not witnessed is, among others, a post of a blueprint map of the building, classrooms, dormitories, and hallways include installment of serviceable fire extinguisher machines. There should be a telephone 3 list including names of the employees, the pages of the teachers and parents for contacts in case of an emergency. The paramount of all is that the fire drills should be carried out as often as possible to boost the preparedness in various institutions. The dormitories should also have emergency exits at the middle and at the back, and windows must be without grills and should be easy to open outwards, not inside the dormitory. Now, fire extinguishers and fire alarms should also be fitted into the dormitories in case of a fire outbreak, so that it can alert the students who are within the confines of such a dormitory when such kind of an incident happens. Now, to avert such kind of disasters, the government incorporated personal safety and psychological skills training in the curricula for basic and tertiary institutions following the signing into law of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development Amendment Bill of 2019. Now, some of the pertinent questions, the million-dollar question that is being raised in the country right now: who is to blame for these incidences we are witnessing? Have these regulations been implemented? And how can this be averted down the line? Talk to us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1 and at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. Before I get to introduce you my guest who will help us in at least understanding this particular scenario, a history of school fires in the country that go way back in the early 90s. In 1991, in St. Kizito Secondary School, Tigania fire, we saw, unfortunately, 19 girls died after boys stormed their dormitory. In 1998, 26 girls died at the Bomolulu Girls Secondary School in Maziras. And in Machakos County, we unfortunately lost 67 boys in 2001. And now at the Endarasha Boys Secondary School, that was back in 2010, we lost 2 students. In 2012, the Asumbi Girls Boarding Primary, unfortunately, we lost 8 students there. And then, of course, the latest one before the Endarasha school incident was in 2017 in Moi Girls High School, where we lost 10 students who perished. And of course, we're also keeping tabs on various stories that are currently making headline at this hour, including the top story for this bulletin is that the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport saw a go-slow yesternight, and of course this morning as well. We have dispatched our reporters there to just give us a brief update, given that the Kenya Airports Workers Union, that is KAU, had started off their strike. And of course, we saw a lot of passengers being stranded. We'll be linking up with our very own Joseph Wahungu, who has been addressed to go to that particular function, and so that he can bring us up to speed with whatever is happening there. We also do have the 2023 SACCO Supervision Report. We have also the Breathe Nairobi official launch, the Enabling Children with Disabilities, and various committees that are happening at the corridors of the August House. Now, joining us for this pertinent conversation is none other than Joshua Nyambane, an educationist. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Abdi.
And close to Joshua is Kimani Mwangi, a governance expert. Kimani, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Let me start with you, Joshua. First of all, your initial thoughts when you saw the Endarasha tragedy.
Thank you, Abdi. First and foremost, may I take this opportunity in earnest to pass my condolence at a personal level to the families that lost their young ones, infants, whose future was bright, only to be cut short by this disaster. It is a tragedy and we fellow Kenyans join the school fraternity and the community at large to mourn. I would want to say that disaster prevention and mitigation in schools is paramount. This is because of the variety of potential hazards that come with it. So we need to, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that due to the historical disaster happenings of fire in schools,
Yes.
the government, through the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders, as we speak, we have a standard safety guideline on what should be done in terms of preparedness.
Yes.
Whatever has happened in Endarasha is basically challenging our disaster preparedness. Are we implementing the disaster standards that we have set in this country? It is a question whether are we waiting for disasters to strike, because eventually they will, for us to start to react. The response should be not necessarily towards what we can actually prevent. So it's unfortunate that these things are happening in the 21st century, but I want to say this is a sign of ineffectiveness in terms of, inspection of our schools.
Yes.
We need to do audit so that we can be able to see where there is gaps and be able to address them. Yes.
Let me get the opening remarks as well as Kimani before we cue in our various stories.
Firstly, I too would like to pass my message of condolence to the parents who've lost their youngsters, and even a message of quick recovery to the boys who are fighting for their lives in hospitals. It's a very sad thing, especially for us as a country at a time like this, because it isn't the first tragedy. It's been, as you've sequenced them, it's been a norm, so to put it, and sadly at it, that we have had these fires. And in 2008, we came up with the school safety manuals and procedures that were to be adopted by all schools to avert these tragedies. While it is true that it is in the nature of things for accidents to happen, what counts is the preparedness that a country has put in place to ensure safety of its children going to school and even its citizens at large. And I think a time has come for us to stop playing around with people's lives. Just like a criminal would commit a crime, I think a person who does a dormitory in blatant violation of school procedures and school safety procedures, blatant violation, you've been given a manual. You know surely how a dormitory should be designed. What should be put in place just in case a day like what happened in Hillside happens, to make sure that the children that you've been entrusted with by parents are safe. And you completely ignore all those procedures. In as much as it is an accident that there was fire, I strongly believe that a time has come for us now to start holding such people accountable. We must also hold accountable the people who are supposed to inspect and ensure that before dormitories are open for use by students, that all the procedures, the safety manuals have been adhered to. We cannot be paying people who do not do their jobs. We allow people to run schools in blatant violation of what has been put in place as safety measures. And then all we do is to sympathize with parents who've lost children, who've been paying school fees, charged by these criminals, if I may call them, who run dormitories that do not adhere to safety measures. And then even the parents ourselves, how knowledgeable are we about where we take our children to school as boarding facilities? Do we visit them? Do we raise questions that in case of fire, how would even my son get out of this dormitory if it is closed? I think there has been a lot of negligence from all our ends. The parents, the teachers, the government, and Hillside tragedy ought to be the last. We need now to take deliberate measures, ensure that we've stuck to what we have agreed and what we've put down on a paper, and punish heavily those who run institutions that do not adhere with the safety measures that were agreed upon, a copy of which I'm sure each school was served with. Yeah.
And hold your thoughts there, gentlemen. We'll be coming back and talking about that so much. But we want to take our story that was prepared by none other than John Jacob Curia in terms of what truly transpired at the Endarasha Academy. I told you earlier on we'll be linking up with him any moment from now, and of course in our various other bulletins, so that he can inform us how the investigations are ongoing. But first things first, let's take a look at that story and we continue with our conversation.
At the Hillside Endarasha Academy, the multi-agency investigating team fills the school compound. It is the 5th day of piecing together links that will finally answer the puzzle in the minds of parents over what transpired on the fateful Thursday night. The team is led by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, who have already closed the school and marked it a scene of crime. Even journalists are not allowed past the administration block so as not to contaminate the scene. But the officers are rushing against time to conclude the investigations before the schools reopen, particularly for grade 6 students expected to sit the KPSEA exams. And as the investigations continue, the Kenya Power and Lighting Company appears to be absolving itself from blame.
The fire did not affect 2 prepaid meters located within the larger school complex. This was also the case for all other adjacent customers supplied by the same transformer. The conclusion, based on the findings of the preliminary analysis of our protection systems from the meter box to the substation, where the medium voltage line serving the school emanates from, we have ascertained that there was no link between the cause of the fire and the fault on our network as alleged in a section of the media reports.
While there were claims that a bulb explosion could have caused the fire, the power utility firm says none of its power infrastructure was at fault before and during the incident, further denying that there was a power blackout in the area by the time of the incident.
Issues to do with fire, being an active investigation going on, the fire experts can tell us because different fires have different impacts, reaction times and all that. We may not be able to conclusively talk about it.
The autopsy for the 21 victims of a tragedy commences Wednesday morning, an exercise that will be led by the government pathologist. The exercise was preceded by the collection of DNA samples on Monday, with DNA matching exercise expected to last for a month. But for Angeline Wamboi, the exercise on Monday did not even bring some sort of closure. Instead, it opened another chapter of anguish in her life. Despite her participation in the DNA sample collection, Wamboi claims her 11-year-old son Robinson may have survived the fire.
Kulingana venye walituelezea ni kweli, wanasema mahesabu yenye wanasema ni kama ilihesabika, lakini sasa siko sure, bado sijakubali kwamba mtoto wangu ameenda, sababu sasa unapewa information kwamba mtoto tulitoka naye na yule ni classmate wake, si ati ni mtu ana ninio, ni mtu ati hamjui ama hawasomi, wanasoma class moja.
She claims several children have corroborated information that her child had escaped the fire unscathed, but without any clothes.
Venye nilisikia moto iliwaka, nilitumana, sistangu anakaa hapa Nyeri, mimi nakaa Mombasa. So nilituma sistangu na akatoka na akaenda kule, lakini bado hakupata mtoto. Lakini kuna mtoto wa classmate wake alikuwa anasema kwamba walitoka na huyo mtoto na hata wakapewa blanketi pamoja, wakajifunikia. Though yule mtoto mamake haishi bali, so mamake alipotokezea akaita mtoto wake, wakaenda na mtoto wake, na hawakujua kama wagu wamebaki kwa class gani, sababu waliambiwa waingie class B.
Wamboi hopes the coming days will accord her respite and put a smile back on her face by reuniting with her son. As the multi-agency team investigating the fire tragedy at the Hillside Endarasha Academy continues to piece crucial evidence that could lead towards what transpired on that fateful day, the revelation by the Kenya Power and Lighting Company that none of its supply lines or connection can be blamed for the tragedy leaves the investigation team with two options: to look into the solar power connection or foul play.
Well, that is our very own Joe Jacob Kiru, who's been keeping tabs on that particular story. He's currently in Endarasha and will be duly informing us on what the investigators are saying as they continue to look into the matter. Remember, President William Ruto had directed the various security agencies to look into the matter and bring to book the people who are responsible for that particular incident. Now, before we continue with our conversation, once again, a little bit of history of school fires in Kenya. We have witnessed this since way back in the 1990s, and we started off in 1991. There you have it on your screen. St. Kizito Secondary School, Tigania fire, where we unfortunately lost 19 girls who died after boys stormed their dormitory. Following that particular incident, 7 years later down the line, that is in 1998, 26 girls died at the Bomululu Girls Secondary School in Mazaras. After that, shortly 2 years, 2000, or rather 3 years, 2001, 67 boys unfortunately died in Machakos County. And following that particular incident, 9 years down the line, the Endarasha Boys Secondary School, 2 students died in that particular incident. In 2012, Asumbi Girls Boarding Primary School, 8 students unfortunately died there. And after that, 5 years down the line, in 2017, Moi Girls High School, 10 students perished. And of course, you do know the latest incident is the Hillside Academy in Nyeri County, where we unfortunately lost over 20 students. So those are the graphics we have for you this morning as we discuss school safety and who dropped the ball when it comes to regulations. Joshua, let me come back to you. Given that you have interacted so much with these students, what goes through their mind before they decided to set ablaze a dormitory?
Abdi, first, may I say something after watching that coverage? That for the Kenya Power, KPLC, it's not the time for them to defend themselves. In fact, if you ask me, Kenya Power and Lighting Company should not just give us electricity to our schools, but they should also come and check whether there are emergency safety standards in case there was an outbreak of fire because of faulty connections. Because, you know, the integrity of the buildings that we built, especially in schools, we could be having electricity, but they are very poor or faulty wiring, which the Kenya Power and Lighting Company should not just come to read the meter and get paid, but they should go to some extent to establish a disaster preparedness department that would go to inspect some of these installations that requires huge amounts of electricity. Secondly, I want to say that we should have thorough scrutiny. We must have thorough investigations so that we can be able to understand what is the cause. We may not be able, unfortunately, to bring back the lives of these young ones. However, it could be, you know, a genesis of trying to arrest and bring to an end the future, you know, disasters, as you have seen, that have started earlier 90s. In school setup, there are so many issues. In case there is fire that is coming from outsiders or from students' dissatisfaction, or from the staff.
Get more response from the Kenya Airports Authority, including the Kenya Airways. Now, a little while ago, Kenya Airways, of course, released a statement urging that they were saying that they would like to alert you that due to the action by some of the JKI staff that has resulted in some delays and possible cancellation of some hour flights for both the departing and arriving passengers, we continue to observe the situation and will update you on the affected flights. And we've just heard then that the Kotu Secretary Secretary boss, that is none other than Francis Atwoli, has already arrived there to maybe bargain with the union, as well as we do understand government officials will be heading over there to understand how they can at least resolve this particular quagmire. Kimani, before we move on to our topic of the day, let me get your thoughts. The cow strike that has caused passengers being stranded at JKIA.
I listened to one of the cow leaders saying that he does not think that leaking of the airport and the flooding that we've seen warrants the airport to be leased to the Adani brothers. I'm not even worried so much about the government decision to lease. The government knows well why to do so. It is what we've heard about the agreement that shocks me, and that needs a very clear communication from the government to dissuade this information or even to tell us the truth. Because if what we've heard is true, then what we are asking ourselves is who in the government, in his right senses, could commit Kenya to such an agreement with whoever it is that is leasing the airport. Because when you commit yourself to an agreement that says that for 30 years you are not going to develop the existing airports or upgrade them, and you cannot build a new one that would compete with JKIA, I can imagine from the time I became cognizant of myself, I haven't lived 30 years. And I want to believe who would commit our country to such tragedy, whereby for 30 years, imagine 30 years, the steps we've made in terms of economic growth as a country, and then you tell us, today is 2024, right?
Yes.
So you're taking us back to 1994, right? Now imagine how Kenya was in 1994 and what Kenya is today, and you're telling us that for a period similar to that one, we shall not touch or even develop our airport in Mombasa, International Airport. We've had Eldoret now turned into a city. Nakuru is a city. Now in the 4 cities, we shall not improve our airports. We shall not build a new one, even if we make Thika a city or any other, including Isiolo, that was part of the Vision 2030, that we shall not turn it into international airport that we wanted to, just because of 2 gentlemen who feels entitled that they can't compete with anybody else now that they've been given JKIA to run. And then you're telling us that you're ready to borrow money to be used by the Adani brothers the way they want in management of the airport. But if they make losses, then it is the prerogative of the government to pay, regardless of how the losses were made.
But don't we have similar deals like the standard gauge railway? We have the expressway. We don't own them. We help to run them through PPP.
No, think about it, like the example you're giving of the express highway. It's just a road, right? That facilitates my movement from the airport to Nairobi town, to Nairobi CBD. And then there is an option that I can use the lower one, or the normal one that existed before the express highway. And I pay, it's a PPP,
Yes.
right? While it may not be a good deal, but it doesn't have the ability to hinder our growth like our most treasured airport has, right? Firstly, it is the pride of our nation. Number 2, it is the one that connects us to the world. It is our biggest airport, one of the best in Africa. It connects us to all other parts of the world because it is the only one that has flights leaving country directly to nearly all other parts of the world. Now, you're telling us that our point of connection to the world should be in the hands of people who do not want to be responsible of even their own actions. They want power without responsibility.
Okay.
Give us power to hire, give us power to fire, give us power to manage the amenities of the airport, give us power to borrow, but then don't ask us to be responsible of the money we borrow.
Okay.
Don't ask us to be responsible of our actions. What kind of a contract is that?
Okay.
I support those who are striking, and I tell the government to rethink this contract. It owes us an explanation, and it owes us the nitty-gritties of this contract so that we know whether what we have been told is true or it is not.
Okay.
And then there is a process through which such contracts should be made. There was no public participation, there was no involvement of the National Assembly. These things should not be allowed to happen with all the secrecy surrounding it.
Okay. Joshua, your thoughts?
Basically, Abdi, my thoughts are very brief. Kenya is an aviation hub within the region. So any strike that emanates or that is done within Kenyan airports affects significantly the entire region. Okay, the government has said this is a private-public partnership. The question is, was there a specific procedure that arrived at awarding the famous Adani Holdings, Airport Holdings, to come and improve our facility in the airport? Improving the facility is not the problem here. Because as you see the workers' union, the airport workers' union, they are complaining about the impending or the anticipation of loss of jobs, and also bringing in foreign workers within the airport. For me, the advice I would give, and I don't know why the government, 21st century, with the most progressive constitution, cannot be able to bring out this information before, so that people are aware. You cannot enter into an agreement on behalf of the people of Kenya, and they don't understand what is contained therein, in that specific agreement. And I think for me, that's the major, problem that we are facing. Let the government come out clear and be able to tell us this is what is contained in the agreement. And I believe that we together will support and move forward. Let them guarantee the workers that their jobs are not going to get lost. And of course, we don't expect to bring external or foreigners to come and work when we are actually yearning to get jobs. We are looking for jobs in Germany, and yet we're inviting foreigners to come and do what exactly Kenyans are capacitated to do.
And of course, those are the initial thoughts we have for you, given that we have just been updated by our very own Joseph Wahungu, who is currently at the JKIA. Your images you saw on your screen was passengers being stranded, long queues at the international side, as well as even the local traveling side, and of course the parents as well as tutors and other people who have congregated at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airports are demanding for answers with KQ. There you have it, KQ asking for more questions. You can see even internationals queuing there to at least catch their flight. We are waiting to even get a response from the Kenya Airports Authority, as well as the Ministry of Transport that is being headed by none other than Davis Chirchir. You do know that a few weeks back we saw the Labour CS, that is Dr. Alfred Mutua, having an engagement with the Kenya Airport Workers Union led by their Secretary General, that is Moses Ndiema. It proved to be unfruitful, and that is why the KAU union decided to go on a strike, and we'll duly inform you. Even a week back, Treasury, led by none other than their Cabinet Secretary and the Principal Secretary, Chris Kipto, who appeared before a National Assembly committee, clearly stated that in the coming weeks, the government will be making bare the deal between JKIA and the Adani deal that is expected to run for more than 30 years. And of course, that conversation will continue. But let's head over back to our various conversations that we're having in terms of school safety. We were discussing on various possibilities on how to evade such kind of incidences to occur in the country once more. If you're just joining us, we were discussing on matters to do with school safety and what are some of the regulations that the government has put in place to ensure that those crises are averted. We have seen this as a recurring theme since the way back in the 90s all the way to 2024. And of course, the main question is who is to blame. Initially, Joshua, I had asked you, this is not the first time we've witnessed these issues. Even after the Endarasha incident, we saw some of dormitories in other institutions being burnt down by even students themselves. That is yet to be ascertained. But what goes through the mind of these students when they decide to raise down a dormitory?
Abdi, I just want to say this. That there are so many causes of disaster in schools. And in this context, you're looking at fire.
Yes.
I want to say there are so many causes in the sense that there are certain causes could touch the learners. Investigation could touch the learners who are the cause.
Yes.
And there are certain causes that could touch on infrastructural defects,
Yes.
including, poor wiring, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, the way the structures have been built. And of course, use of things that are not allowed within the school setup and are flammable, like gas. There are certain causes that can touch members of staff. To be very specific, it can touch teachers and other non-teaching staff. And there are certain causes that can be external. In this context, there are also causes that can be associated to poor administration.
Yes.
In this context, for the learners, if I can identify for the learners as one specific variable, the learners, you and I know that there is a justification why learners actually could decide either to go on strike, ban their school, and so on. One, you have seen teachers on strike before the schools are opened. You have seen Gen Zs on the street, and they're challenging the current generation that we're talking about, which is actually in school. You have seen doctors on strike. So what makes these learners not to go on strike? What is the trigger of the students to go on strike, especially at this time? And I think the means of education should be somehow aware. Because number one, there is fear of examinations. As you are aware, the exams have just come. For the students, they have been seeing a year to be a very long period. They have now discovered, look, I've only a month, and the exams are starting. So that fear and anxiety can lead to strikes. There is also other aspects. The school administrations have said, 21st century learner, there is a way should be handled. And that's where we need to look for a way to resolve conflict because of human rights, the rights of a child, because more of the children nowadays are informed about their rights. So the way the administrations and the school management are going to implement certain policies, it's also going to affect the way students react. For example, food. If the student feels that food is not sufficient and is not even, the portion is not enough, that itself can cause a strike. Two, sports and entertainment. This being a term, a very short term, you realize that most of the activities are going to be shelved, or they are not going to be there actually, because first term, second term, there is that schedule for sports and other activities. Now we don't have. So these learners have energy that is not consumed. And that can actually, and more or less the schools are more rigid to accept these learners to access certain recreational facilities or activities. That can cause a strike. Finally, on that aspect of the students, this term you realize the Ministry of Education released a circular on how the term is going to be spent. I have not seen, actually you have not seen an iota of even a day where these learners are going to have a break. So break, or let's call it mid-term break, or half-terms, are not there. It is important just for affirmative action. The means of education could create even a weekend out. Allow principals, heads of schools, to create weekend outs just to ensure that even if it's once a weekend out, then they come back to school, that will be able to allow them to unwind. Not to see that we don't have, half terms. There are so many aspects of that can create school strikes. But I want to say it's not limited to students. It can also be caused by other factors.
Okay.
Yes.
As you share the same thought, Kimani, we are talking about some of the policies that are already in place put by the government and the Ministry of Education that schools ought to keep tabs in and ensure they are implemented. The other question that parents are asking, not just from Endarasha, but parents across the country, where are these people who are supposed to supervise and inspect some of these institutions?
Firstly, allow me to put it this way. If I may add to what my fellow discussant has been talking about, it is good that we understand that the current student is not the student we were in our days. In our days, there was corporal punishment.
Yes.
And we were hammered into shape through corporal punishment. And we knew that some things, there was punishment for such actions. So it was very rare, although it still happened, but it was rare to witness the kind of burning of schools we are witnessing nowadays. And it boils down to even how we bring up our children at home. I think besides what Joshua has said, the government need also to let the student know that there should be, for every action, there should be responsibility. That any student who wishes to express themselves by burning down schools, there must be very clear communication to these students that they are not going to be let to go unpunished. Because you may do everything else, but as long as the students keep walking out of it unpunished, then there is no deterrent in a way. So one, I think we need to train the institution heads and to keep training them to be able to know how to handle these youngsters. That's number one. Number two, we also need to train the students to know that they could express themselves without necessarily having to cause the damage they keep causing. They need to be trained, and it needs to be a program. Like they study physics and others, they need even to study on how to express themselves without causing the damage they keep causing and the expenditure they keep causing their parents to incur. The other thing we need to do also, we need to have a way that the students can communicate to the ministry besides the school. Because if strikes are happening as a result of pent-up feelings that students feel they have to vent at some point, then there ought to be a mechanism to prevent or to act as a vent for these feelings. If the institution's management is not listening to the students, then students need to have another channel of communication. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the Ministry of Education to come up with another channel of communicating with the students so that they can even be the ones giving feedback to the principal. That your kids will go on strike because you failed to listen to them on these issues. All right? And then there ought to be a mechanism to monitor the relationship between the institution's management and the students, what the students are proposing, what the students want done, vis-a-vis what is doable, so that we try and make sure that these do not happen. On the measures that have been put in place, it should not be compromisable. Just like there is a building code, and before a house is allowed to accommodate people, it must have a certificate of completion and a certificate to allow people to move in. No dormitory should be open for use by students without having met all the requirements. It must have, as it has been required of it, that it must have large windows that do not have grills that open from outside. The same with doors that must not be less than 5 feet in width. It must have doors at both ends and at the middle. the space between the beds must be at least 1.2 meters. The corridor must be 2 meters. It shouldn't be on the upper floors. Can you imagine some schools have dormitories on that floor? What would happen if students decided it in fire has quarters and we have to jump? The jumping alone would also result in very many deaths. Now, all these things that the government, we have a government that has beautiful policies, very beautiful policies on paper, acquiring dust where they were kept. But now when it comes to us going to where the rubber meets the road and ask ourselves, have schools been in keeping of the policy we have put in place to make sure that the learners are safe? Where are the government inspectors? When you have dormitories that are constructed in blatant violation of the policies, when we have institutions that have completely ignored all those safety measures. I was looking at the Auditor General's report on some institutions, and you hear that there are institutions that are housing students in houses that have been condemned. They are not fit for accommodation, yet they are serving as classes, they are serving as dormitories, they are serving as laboratories, and the government is in possession of Auditor General's report that has condemned, or the Ministry of Work has condemned those houses. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education knows it. Those schools, they have board of management. They know that this dormitory has been condemned. Yet there are students who sleep there. A disaster in waiting. Then when it happens, we shall be here to pass our message of condolence to parents whose children have died in those condemned buildings in the eyes of the government. Now, I think that the president needs to take charge of this matter. He needs to hold his people in the Ministry of Education accountable. He needs to hold these rogue institution owners and institution heads and the board of management that are allowing students to operate in an environment that they shouldn't, because no actions, such actions or actions should not go unpunished. They shouldn't.
Yeah, of course. And the president called for that particular meeting with the heads of state, with the heads of institutions, as well as the Ministry of Education, to tell them to look for the people who are behind these particular incidences. Going back to you, Joshua, we're looking at some of the aftermath now, the psychological effects of some of these students, because there are some who survived and they are required to go back to that particular institutions, given that they have to sit for their KPSEA. So how should teachers approach, given that you have been in that particular scenario, how should the teachers approach those learners when they come back to school?
Abdi, before we go there, I just want to say that Kenya has created structures, or we call them institutions. The question we need to pose at the moment is whether these institutions are basically working or they are dysfunctional. The Ministry of Education is not the only specific person to ask when it comes to ensuring there is safety. Because obviously the boarding schools, where the parents just allow their children to go to school, they believe that we have safety in these boarding schools. Apart from the safety standards manual, all schools need to have the safety protection, or what we call them the protection policies, the children protection policies, and bullying policies. They must have operationalized emergency, mechanisms when issues arise. The National Disaster Management, which is a very important body or institution in Kenya, should be empowered. I believe that it's not only the responsibility of the ministry or the president, because honestly, it's not everything the president is going to do. That's why we have institutions that ought to work. We also have KICD. I always remember that there is an institution called KICD, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, which I believe should make it compulsory that all within the curriculum there is at least basic first aid, at least training that goes to the teachers, the learners, the management of those schools, which should be compulsory. All institutions of higher learning universities, colleges, tertiary institutions should make it compulsory that we receive basic disaster management courses or trainings. So continuous training is paramount. The Disaster Management Authority in Kenya should visit schools together with the means of education to check whether these safety standards are adhered to. On the question about the students or the learners going back, obviously it is, I would say, psychologically overwhelming because these learners need to go to the same institution where they have seen their colleagues, or we call them their learned friends, die. And then they are expected to go there to sit for the exams. It is something torturous, and that's why I mentioned and I said clearly that there should be a very serious scrutiny and investigations of what happened, especially in the Hillside School and Darasha.
Okay.
So we know they will require a lot of psychosocial support, and I believe that the ministry is prepared, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, prepared to provide that support.
Okay.
Yes.
And of course, as we're coming closer to our conversation on school safety, what you're seeing on the screen is currently the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, given that KAU have ensured that the airport goes on a go-slow after following their strike notice that they issued a few weeks back. And of course, they implemented that midnight yesterday night. And of course, KAA, the Kenya Airports Authority, has just issued a statement on the situation at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And they say that early this morning, a section of the airport workers at JKIA engaged a strike contrary to a court order case number ELRC E648 in 2024. As of 7 a.m. this morning, many more operations had resumed. In the meantime, they are engaging relevant parties to normalize operations, and they apologize for any inconvenience caused and appreciate the patience and understanding during this hardship time. Meanwhile, they encourage the passengers to reach out to their respective airlines to confirm the flight status. And of course, as you can see on your screen, those are live images from JKIA. Those are passengers who are currently stranded there, awaiting their flights. Some of them, our reporter Joseph Ohungu had engaged with them and clearly stated that their flights have been postponed hours to their initial time that they were supposed to board. And of course, as well as Kenya Airways has issued a statement urging for patience for the passengers. And of course, once again, the KAA has just issued a statement in regards to the situation at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. That is among the terminals that you're seeing on your screen. Passengers, including internationals, are stranded. You can even see the security enforcers are there to provide security at that particular airport. You do know it is a protected area. And of course, the police have to offer security. And of course, currently conversations are still ongoing between the Airports Authority and the union, that is the Kenya Aviation Workers Union. We're also going to hear from the various ministries that are pertaining in regards to this particular issue, the Ministry of Labour as well as the Ministry of Transport. KAA has just issued a statement urging the passengers to be patient and understanding during this particular time, and they encourage passengers to reach out to their various airlines to confirm their flights. And of course, we'll be linking up with our reporter Joseph Ohungu as we continue with News Check. But we come back here to the studio, given that we are winding up the conversation on school safety. I want to give my guest the opportunity to give their final remarks before we head over to our second hour. We are set to discuss a digital economy. Let me start with you, Mr. Kimani. Just tell us your final remarks on school safety.
My final remarks on school safety is that the Ministry of Education, being the key stakeholder on these matters, needs to, once and for all, ensure that we do not have an occurrence like the one we had in Hillside. It is in the nature of things that accidents must happen. We may not be able to completely stop it from happening, but we must be prepared well enough to mitigate the losses caused by such accidents. One way is by ensuring that we do not just come up with the policies that are never adhered to. They must be adhered to. And as I've also said, the ministry, in conjunction with its other stakeholders it works with, ought to ensure also that these fires, especially the one whose causes is not accident, are acts of arson, come to an end also, because it is doable. It is possible to make sure that students are not angry to a point of burning institutions. And it is also possible to make sure that the students have been trained to a point of understanding and having it within themselves, that they can have their issues resolved without resorting to the damages they cause.
Okay.
So we leave it to the Ministry of Education to ensure that the occurrence of such has been reduced to the minimal possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Kimani. Joshua, your final remarks?
Abdi, it's very important for us to note that most of the schools have no capacity to handle disasters. The Ministry of Education has guidelines that are supposed to guide on how structures and disasters are supposed to be arrested. It's important for the government of the Republic to mobilize all the institutions, as I said, whether it's the private NGOs like Red Cross, KICD, the National Disaster Management, and also have a comprehensive partnership with local, or let me say county governments, which actually handle most of these disasters. Otherwise, disasters are making dispensation of learning in our schools very difficult. I wish to take this chance again to say sorry and pass my personal condolence to those parents who have lost their children through these disasters.
Thank you so much. That is Joshua Nyambane, an educationist, as well as Kimani Mwangi, governance expert. Gentlemen, thank you for making time for us to discuss these crucial topics. And of course, once more, as the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, we do offer our condolences to the parents who have lost their dear ones following that particular tragic accident. We'll be focusing on that, as well as what is happening at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. A while ago, I just informed you that KAA had issued a statement. Kenya Airways as well has issued a statement. Also, we're expecting the government authorities led by the Ministry of Labour and Transport to be talking about this particular issue. I'm sure they will have boots on the ground, as well as the security status at JKA, given that KAU have started their industrial action that commenced yesterday night at exactly 12 midnight. And of course, we need to take a short breather. When we come back, we'll be focusing on the digital economy. Where are we as a country? My guests are already in studio. That is Hilary Lisimba, a digital journalist, Enoch Chisengo, a digital economy consultant, and Muriuki Murunge, who is the MD of Idea Hive East Africa. Don't go too far for that conversation.